What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, June 28th, 2017, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauha on a Friday. And I have to tell you in all honesty, there are some days when this is actually a very tough job to do, when the news is as alarming and troubling as what we're going to be talking about today. And I'll try and come up with some jokes to lighten the mood here, but things are looking very chaotic right now. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Quick little program now. Note, the lovely Lady Claire will not be with us on Friday. She has a conflict in her very, very busy schedule. But she is going to be sharing the mic with me on July 4th, Independence Day, so you'll get your Claire fix there and then. Getting on to the news here, the Senate is having their hearings on Russian interference in the election, and it is a nonstop rousing chorus of, we're pretty sure Russia did it, even though there is no actual proof. And that's basically what it is. It is condemnation by acclamation, and they're just trying to push that Russia is this evil country that's in here tinkering with our politics. And as Oliver Stone pointed out on Stephen Colbert's show, Israel's in here tinkering with our politics all the time, and nobody seems to make a big deal about that. And the U.S. interferes with the politics of other countries on a regular basis here. But we have to demonize Russia. Russia's doing terrible things because we are, it appears, on an inevitable path to conflict with Russia. Now, story coming out of Southfront.org, U.S. launches campaign to justify military action against Syria. What's going on is that with the Russian no-fly zone west of the Euphrates, where the Syrian government troops are succeeding in pushing the U.S.-backed rebels out of Syria, and even more alarming, those U.S.-backed rebels are now starting to fight each other. They're turning on each other for gains of territory that they think they're going to own when this is all over. And so the U.S. is losing this, and the only way they can think to try and recover from this, they have to find a way to escalate it, which is what led to this ridiculous nonsense yesterday where they came on out and said, well, we're pretty sure that Assad is getting ready to do another gas attack. And again, it would be stupid for Assad to do that at this point. And I think other governments are now past the point of politeness, and they're coming on out. A good example, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif basically came out and said there's another dangerous U.S. escalation in Syria on fake pretext, will only serve ISIS. And so everybody knows the government is lying again. Another article, this one came out of Sputnik News. Oh, it's Iraq's weapons of mass destruction all over again. So nobody's buying this thing. And again, it is the Syrian rebels who have a motive to use chemical weapons and frame Assad for it. Assad doesn't have a reason. He's winning the war. The last thing he's going to do is commit an act that would allow the United States to say, oh, well, we just have to come on in and bomb more places and escalate this war here. Now, the good news is apparently so many people came back and said this is nonsense. Remember, I told you over at Breitbart. Normally, Breitbart's readers are pretty fair, even, and balanced, but when Breitbart ran this story about how the White House was saying, well, we're pretty sure Assad is going to do another gas attack, 90% of the comments on the article were negative, saying it's another lie. They're signaling a false flag attack again. And so it looks like the U.S. government has blinked because today Mattis is out there saying, well, it appears Assad is not going to go forward with his chemical attack because he's taking our warning on the chemical attack very, very seriously. Basically what's happened here, the government has realized nobody was buying this USDA choice bovine excrement, and the public is going to assume any gas attack is another U.S. false flag. So they've backed off, at least for the moment, and now they're trying to save face. See, we talked tough, and Assad didn't carry out the gas attack he wasn't going to do anyway. But I think it's at best a temporary reprieve, because Fars News is reporting that there are unusual flights of U.S. spy planes over the Syrian coasts. Apparently a large number of them gathering information preparatory to an invasion from the Mediterranean. And so it looks like it's on, and I would say that their strategy now is to just move on an attack on Syria before public resistance, popular resistance against these wars can build anymore, because it's building rapidly out there. And it could happen this weekend. It could actually happen on the 4th when we're all distracted with our fireworks, for those of you lucky enough to still have those available to you, hot dogs and beer and whatever else you're going to do on the 4th of July. But it does feel like it is imminent. We're going to do a quick little shout-out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining our network. Moscow has basically issued a warning to Washington, D.C. against incendiary, provocative action in Syria, which is diplomatic speak for, we know you're getting ready to attack. And Russia is again saying it's unacceptable. It breaches Syria's sovereignty. There is no military need from the point of view of the United States. Syria has not attacked us. So everybody knows what's going on here. It's another U.S. war. And basically, I think the thinking in the Pentagon is they have to win this one, because if they were to lose it, it would derail the rest of the war agenda across the Middle East and South America and everywhere else they want to invade. Iran's Shamkhani is warning against U.S. adventurism in Syria and says basically the United States is playing with fire. They could ignite a regional war into which Russia is probably going to be drawn. Russia has made promises to Iran and Syria and other countries to stand with them. And the danger of that is, now you already know, I don't think the United States can stand up in a conventional war against Russia and China and will resort to the nuclear weapons. But let's say hypothetically we get into this war and we're winning against Russia and China, they'll use their nukes. And I'm not the only person who's concerned about this. Article out of Global Research. Trump is playing nuclear chicken with Putin over Syria. This thing could escalate out of control so quickly. And again, I'm wondering about the quality of thinking in Washington, D.C. Is there something in the water? Do they have lead in their water like Flint, Michigan? Are they all on prescription antidepressants? I expected better quality thinking from the new Trump administration, but it seems just as reckless and short-sighted and narrow-viewed as the predecessors. Now, Mattis has also announced that the U.S. will keep arming the Syrian Kurds after Raqqa falls, which is going to make Turkey very, very nervous, because they're concerned about the new arising Kurdistan grabbing a chunk of their country. And Mattis, of course, if he thinks the Kurds are just going to give back those weapons when it's all over, he's dreaming. They'll hide those weapons. They'll never get those things back. It's more destabilization in the area. Now, as you know, the corporate media is reeling from this video that came out from Project Veritas, where they got this CNN producer, John Bonifield, admitting there is no evidence that President Donald Trump or his campaign colluded with Russia. And he says right on the tape, this is all about grabbing ratings, because there are a lot of people out there who hate Donald Trump, and they're all CNN viewers, and they're tuning in to get their daily dose of the fantasy that Donald Trump is going to go down in flames. Huzzah, 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 huzzah. One of our listeners wrote on in and said, we ought to call CNN the Bezos blog, because that seems to be really all it's about. So the Washington Post is attacking James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, that they're trying to claim the video was faked. But if you watch it, you can see it's pretty much the real deal. There's no way it's been edited out of context. or rigged with. And CNN is still saying, no, absolutely, we support that collusion story, and we don't know what Bonnefeld was thinking, or maybe he was on drugs or antidepressants or something. So they're trying to maintain the line. Washington Post is going on the attack here, and Project Veritas just delivered the next knockout blow in this, because they got Van Jones from CNN on a hidden camera saying that the CNN Russia story is a big nothing burger. And if you look at the tape, and it's on the front of whatreallyhappened.com right now, it's very interesting. They juxtapose what he's saying on camera for his salary with what he says to what he thinks is just a passerby outside. And everybody needs to take both these videos and make them go viral. It's not going to take a lot. They're already going viral out there. Now, do you remember a while back there was this story, again, on CNN, where they claimed an ally of President Trump, a guy named Scaramucci, a financier, network guest, basically was in contact with a Russian bank. And it wasn't right. And apparently, Scaramucci threatened a lawsuit, a $100 million libel suit, and that's what forced CNN to publicly retract the story and urge the three journalists responsible, and I use the term journalists loosely, they're prostitutes and correspondents, they were urged to resign. But he may go ahead with the lawsuit anyway, because the damage is done. The story is out there. You don't get to just lie about somebody and then pull it back. And another example of that, of course, is that Sarah Palin is now suing the New York Slimes over an editorial that attempted to link her to the 2011 shooting of Gabby Giffords. And it just goes on and on and on and on. Let's pull some recent examples. August 10th, 2016, CNN reported that the Secret Service spoke to the Trump campaign about the then nominee's comment regarding the Second Amendment. And he said, Hillary wants to essentially abolish the Second Amendment. By the way, if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. And apparently CNN misquoted and misconstrued what Trump actually said, implying that Trump was calling for an armed rebellion against Clinton if she won. And look who's been calling for or implying rebellion ever since the election is over. It's the snowflakes. It's the liberals. Again, let's see, September 2016, CNN reported that talk radio shock jock Howard Stern said Trump expressed support for the Iraq War on his show in 2002. Stern denied the CNN report and said he had no idea how CNN got that. And it goes on and on and on. It's not a news network anymore. It's a propaganda outlet for sale to the highest bidder. And everybody now understands that. Over at Paul Craig Roberts' website, he's got an article saying it's the prostitutes, not Russia, who interfered in the U.S. presidential election. And he's absolutely right. Because the media was pushing Hillary all the time. They were making up completely bogus stories about Donald Trump trying to harm him. They were not objective, independent reporters of the facts. They were pushing the liberal propaganda. Now, getting over to the White House, a little bit of a staff shake-up. Trump has replaced Jen Psaki with a new assistant to the president for communications, ABC producer Chris Vlasto. And Jen Psaki was one of the Obama holdovers. She was the official spokesperson for the State Department. And she was sort of amusing because she would occasionally make these very strange comments that didn't seem to make a lot of sense. But she's now out. And again, biggest mistake Trump made when he won the election, he wanted to be magnanimous in victory, and he held over a bunch of the Obama people. assuming that they would now be loyal to him because he's the president and, in effect, is signing their paychecks. And that's the way it works in the world of business. But that's not real politics. And I think Trump is finally starting to figure that one out. Now, as you know, Bernie Sanders, actually his wife, is being investigated by the FBI for bank fraud. And Sanders is now out there basically saying it's pathetic, it's politically motivated, and basically he's now saying it's Donald Trump's fault that his wife is being investigated for bank fraud. Okay. Acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe is also under investigation for violating the Hatch Act. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's got nothing to do with eggs. The Hatch Act is a law that makes it illegal for people within the federal government to engage in political activity. There are some exceptions, such as the president and the vice president. But people who are holding these offices are not supposed to be political. Right, Loretta Lynch? And so they're investigating him now as well. A lot of investigation going on. Okay, we are going to take a phone call from Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I think we ought to call the White House and maybe all of us get CNN banned from the press conference, the press conference room.
Couldn't hurt.
Wouldn't hurt. And I was wondering if you also got my email this morning.
What was in it?
I sent a link to you with John B. Wells and Larry Nichols and about Larry dropping that huge bombshell.
Oh, I somehow missed it, but I will look for it right now. All right.
I'll give you my whole name.
No, you don't give me your whole name. Don't say anything over the air here. But I'm doing a search here right now, and hopefully it got here. I mean, the whole net seems to be acting weird here. I don't know that I got it. You might want to resend it.
WRH, right? At What Really Happened?
Yeah, whatreallyhappened.com.
Okay, and WRH. Yeah, I wanted you to hear that interview. I mean, not only it's conspiracy, too, that I was trying to get at you with yesterday with the tape, but, I mean, yeah, I wanted, I think we ought to call in and tell ban CNN from the press conference since they're fake, and they admit that they're fake.
Okay. Let's see. All right. Well, listen, I can't do this while I'm on the air because I got to stay focused on my audience here, but I'm not seeing it. If you could resend that, I would appreciate it.
Got you, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. And, yeah, I mean, the system just isn't working all that well here. Now, interestingly enough, getting on back to the murder of Seth Rich, as you know, the Profiling Project, which is an independent group, it's made up of a lot of university people. They're not paid for what they're doing, but they do really good work on profiling, and they took a look at the Seth Rich murder, and their conclusion, of course, contradicts the official story, that it wasn't simply a random killing for a botched robbery, but that it was, in fact, most likely a professional hit. Well, the Profiling Project has just launched a new website called theprofilingproject.org that is focused on the investigation into the assassination of Seth Rich. So they're pulling together a staff of volunteers to do more work. They've apparently gone before the Washington, D.C. Superior Court to try and force the police department to publicly release critical evidence in the investigation, including apparently Seth Rich's laptop. And again, if the official story is it's just a robbery, why did the police take the laptop? We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I hope there was just a simple mistake. I would be very alarmed if email is not reaching me. It's being interfered with, and of course we know there's a lot of hacking going on out there, trying to protect the status quo, trying to protect the establishment, the deep state, and so forth. And let's see here. I don't have enough problems. I'm rolling across my own wires here. Okay, getting on back to the war zones. Story out of Zero Hedge. Middle East at point of no return as Saudi-Qatar rift deepens. And basically what they're saying is if this goes any further, it will go out of control. We're talking regional war. And the Saudi foreign minister is taking a hard line, saying that the list of demands for Qatar is non-negotiable. Meanwhile, Qatar is saying they're completely unrealistic, which sounds like this list of demands was made up to fail to justify military action against Qatar, which has happened in the past. You know, we make demands, you don't agree to them, they're impossible to agree to. The war is on here. Everybody's arming up. Everybody's getting ready. Pakistan is reportedly testing a Ukrainian-built Oplot-P main battle tank. Big, heavy machine, and it looks like Pakistan may be considering buying some of these. And I'm very concerned about a war between Pakistan and India because they are both nuclear powers. Apparently, the situation on the border with China, between India and China, is still tense. China is now saying that they crossed the border to destroy these Indian bunkers as retaliation for the Indian forces staging an incursion into Chinese territory. And I took a look at the area on Google Earth, and I think a reasonable case can be made that absent a GPS, you might not exactly be sure where you are, because it's way out in the boonies. But everybody's just too tense. Everybody needs to calm down, really, before this gets crazy. Now, getting on back to Saudi Arabia, little interesting development. As we reported yesterday, Crown Prince Salman has shut down a Saudi TV station for reporting that many of the Saudi tribes in Saudi Arabia do not want to pledge their allegiance to him. Apparently, it was not a popular choice to replace him, to replace Nayef bin Abdulaziz with Mohammed bin Salman. And apparently, Mohammed bin Salman was actually concerned that there might be a counter coup. And so it's now come out, Israel sent 18 of their fighter planes, along with 2 Gulfstream aircraft, 2 tanker airplanes, and 2 C-130s, specially built for electronic warfare, to Saudi Arabia to protect Crown Prince bin Salman if his cousin decided he was going to try and recover his office. So Saudi Arabia is not as unified and monolithic as you might think. Things down in Venezuela are just, they're also getting terrible. Apparently, some of the, shall we call them rebels or agent provocateurs, because I still think the U.S. is behind a lot of this, apparently stole, at least that's the story, 3 military helicopters and attacked Venezuela's Supreme Court. And President Maduro is calling this a terrorist incident. But apparently they were using hand grenades and gunfire on the court building, which I think is more symbolic than anything else. And following that, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, is now up at the United Nations calling for an intervention into Venezuela. Boy, does this sound familiar? Have we not been down this road before? Have we not heard this same line, oh, the country's in chaos, we must intervene? Where did the chaos came from? Well, we did it, but now we have to intervene. It's amazing. Here is an interesting article. Actually, we're getting really close to the commercial break, so I'm going to put this article on hold until we come back from these words from our sponsors. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. So, interesting little article. This is over at Sputnik News. And they're talking about how the United States, Great Britain, and France have now signed a deal to boost anti-submarine warfare coordination. In other words, they're going to be setting up an infrastructure or command chain, communication control, where anti-submarine forces from all three countries can operate as a single unit. And that tells us that they are already planning war in the Atlantic sea lanes of communication. Now, interestingly enough, there used to be a system called SOSUS that would sit on the ocean floor, and it would listen to ships. But it was apparently shut down. I think it was turned over to the whale watchers some time ago. So there's going to be an issue of detection because the latest generation of submarines are much, much quieter. The U.S. has been trying to develop this ultra-high power sonar that can penetrate what's called the thermocline. They're getting mixed results on it and killing a lot of ocean life in the process as well. But it's getting really serious out there. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Keith in Montana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I just wanted to comment. This tweet I'd sent you earlier, or late last night, it was from that Jim Ante, I believe it's the Washington Post Examiner or something like that. Anyway, you said, we will never be able to reform the U.S. healthcare system until we have made Afghanistan a functioning liberal democracy. I couldn't believe that.
Oh, man. Are they making this stuff up with a dartboard? You know, just...
I haven't.
You've got a dartboard with all these words all over it. They throw a bunch of darts, and that's today's talking points.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of humorous there, but I just thought I'd share that with you, okay?
Okay. Anything else?
All right, you have a good one there. No, that's it. Have a great one, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Let's see. Getting suggestions about checking my email. Let me just do that. All right, here we go. We've been talking about America's poor quality weapons. Very expensive weapons. And the U.S. sells them to countries who want to be able to say, we're buying the expensive American weapons, huzzah, huzzah, in the fond hope they'll never really have to use them because they don't work very well. We've been talking about the Gerald R. Ford, the Independence-class littoral combat ships, the Freedom-class littoral combat ships, and, of course, epic failure, boondoggle, of the F-35. And apparently, the F-35 is such a failure. They're not going to cancel the program. Too many people are working on it, and they're all making congressional donations, so they're still pushing forward with it. But Congress is actually considering restarting production of the F-22. And hopefully, they'll figure out why, above a certain altitude, the pilots can't breathe. But that's how bad it is. They're going to bring back the F-22, which has its own list of problems and deficiencies here. All right, let's talk about the economic news here just a little bit. The crisis in Illinois, it is a bellwether for what is going to be hitting the entire country. Because, again, the problem with private central banking is, by design, the debt grows faster than the available money supply with which to pay that debt until the debt starts crushing everything down. And Illinois has been letting their bills stack up for 2 years. So what the end result is, hospitals, doctors, and dentists do not get paid for hundreds of millions of dollars of patient care. Social service agencies help fewer people. They don't have any resources to work with. Public universities and the towns that surround them suffer. And the state's bond rating falls to near junk status. People start moving out. So apparently a big part of what got Illinois to this situation was this political standoff between the Republican Governor Bruce Rauner and Democratic Speaker of the House Michael Madigan over spending and term limits, and they haven't even been able to pass a budget for 2 years. Now, state workers and others are still getting paid because of court orders and other stopgap measures. But they're talking about canceling any more work on the roads, and you have to wonder about this governor and this Speaker of the House who are willing to let the people of that state suffer such hardship over a political spat. They seem to have a very misdirected set of priorities as far as I can see. If you are in the government, you are supposed to be there to be working for the people and doing what the people need. That's why it's called civil service rather than civil master. And too many of our politicians have forgotten that. Apparently, the Illinois Lottery is warning of more delayed payouts. They're stopping Powerball. And here's another very alarming story. This is over in New Jersey. Governor Chris Christie wants to seize surplus funds from a private nonprofit health insurer. And basically, Christie is giving his support to a bill that would allow the state government to literally take money from the reserve fund of Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield. And apparently, the bill, if it passes, and Christie says he will sign it, it would permit New Jersey's Department of Banking and Insurance to examine the size of Horizon's surplus and take any amount deemed excessive from the company, depositing it into the state's own health and wellness fund. We have reached the stage in the decline of our economy where the government is plundering companies, along with all of the citizenry through civil forfeiture. That's where we are right now. The government is surviving on pillage and plunder. That should be a warning sign. Over in Flint, Michigan, apparently the city is still trying to collect backwater fees, and they're threatening Flint residents with the loss of their homes if they don't pay for the water which they couldn't drink because it was poisoned by the government of Flint, Michigan. That tells you how messed up this is. The city government made the decision to unhook from the previous water supply and go right to the Flint River to save a few bucks. They didn't put in the necessary chemicals to keep the chemicals that were already in the Flint River from pollution from leaching out, things like lead from the water pipes. And the end result is dangerous water coming out of the tap and the deterioration of those water mains on top of that, which will require eventual replacement. And still the Flint city government is out there saying, you pay those water bills, we're going to take your home away. Doesn't make any sense to me. Doesn't make any sense at all. Well, yeah, actually it does. They're desperate for money. Everybody in government is desperate for money. And at this point, they're willing to do anything to get more of it. Brandon Smith is issuing a warning. The next phase of collapse will include the end of the dollar as we know it. And he's talking about the U.S. currency inflating away to virtually nothing. The Fed is going to move to negative interest rates. And he said basically raising rates was impossible. And this is why, if it were absent rigging, the precious metals would be just soaring right about now. But they're still rigging silver and gold, trying to keep them down, trying to keep you in your bank accounts, trying to keep you in the stock market here. Now, we posted a link to a chart, a graph, showing the value of the U.S. dollar relative to the euro. And the dollar has taken a major drop this last week. So things are starting to accelerate, as it were. Now, there's an article out here, and this is not going to come as a shock to anybody. Central bank intervention serves the 1%. This is from Dave Kranzler. And he's talking, first of all, about the manipulation of gold to protect the banks, to keep you in the savings account, keep you in the stock market. And basically says these banks are serving the 1%. They're not serving the community. We've been saying that for a long time. They exist to serve themselves. All of this intervention, where they just create all this new money out of thin air, it's all was poured over Wall Street. There's nothing coming to the American people. They're moving the money the wrong way. Because as I've said before, for an economy to be functioning efficiently. There has to be a recycling mechanism that brings part of the accumulated wealth at the top back down to the bottom so that workers and middle-class people can trade their labor and skills for decent wages and salaries, which they will then pump back into the economy by going to the car dealerships and buying a new car, by going to the shopping mall and buying a new flat screen whatever, by going out to restaurants more, by buying a new home. And that is the part that is missing in the current system. The 1% are just hoarding it all for themselves. And it's going to accelerate the eventual crash. Maybe they've decided the system can't be saved. And so the attitude is, we're just going to grab everything we can before it all falls apart. And to heck with you ordinary Americans, there's too many of you anyway. Go ahead, starve to death in the streets. So, and again, we're not talking a science. Banking is a religion. It's based on beliefs. And it feeds the money junkies. And yes, that's not a joke. We're talking about a real addiction. You can become addicted to the accumulation of wealth. Remember, right after the 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud meltdown, there was a wonderful documentary called Inside Job. And it actually won the Oscar for Best Foreign Documentary. And one of the things that was in that movie was that researchers actually wired up the brains of Wall Street traders to see what was going on in there. And they discovered that every time the Wall Street trader scored a big deal, made a lot of money in a very short amount of time, the part of the brain that lit up is exactly the same part that lights up when they're doing cocaine. And by the way, there's a lot of cocaine use on Wall Street. It's an addictive process. We don't recognize that we're dealing with addicts because they look good. They got the Armani suits. They're driving the big flashy cars. They've got $100,000 wristwatches on their wrist. They look like somebody you would want to be. All right, I'm going to take a phone call. Tom in Baltimore, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I wouldn't want to be them. They look like thieves. They look like reprobates.
Yep.
By the way, I think you're onto something. Absolutely. I don't think that the system is unsavable. I think that the thieves' appetite for more and more and more thievery is insatiable, just what you're saying. I don't believe for 1 minute that this country is in a state of economic crisis, as they would have us believe. You know, accounting is pretty simple. You know, it's all about assets, liabilities, and equity. And if you look at the type of system that they're using to create their budgets, which tell us, which lie to us and say that they're in dire straits, you'll notice a couple of peculiarities, and one of them is missing equity, missing assets. You know, the proper equity to the shareholders, which should be, in part, the American people, is missing. A lot of assets are missing. And by the way, when they have someone do the books and they say that we've been audited, they're simply talking about an accountant, a regular accountant coming in and adding the numbers and saying, yeah, this looks proper. 2 and 2 is 4, 5 and 5 is 10, so on and so forth. What they don't tell you, and what a lot of people don't realize, is that what really needs to happen is you need a forensic accountant to come in and look for fraud. And
like
that doesn't
Charles
happen
Ortel.
anywhere. That doesn't I don't know who that is, but if he's a forensic accountant, then, in fact, that is what we need, and that is what we don't have, and a lot of people don't realize that when an audit is done, that really isn't doing much of anything at all.
No, it's just they're validating that the math was correct on the cooked books.
Absolutely. So, you know, they always want us to be in a state of perpetual crisis so that they can turn the screws a little bit more, fleece the population a little bit more, and continue, like you said, to feed their appetite for more.
And what's really insane about it all is We're talking about pieces of paper with colored ink and numbers in a computer. There's nothing real there. It's not like we're talking about gold and silver coins or something with intrinsic worth. They're literally addicted to ink, paper, and computer memory. That's it. And they're so caught up in this thing that they are rigging and gaming the system for their own benefit.
Any surplus that we have should be going towards, even if you can call it real debt, because of the way the Federal Reserve is set up. We don't even have an honest system of money. So when you're talking about an elastic economy, you're talking about a manipulative people who manipulate the economy. So yes. I don't even know how you tell what's really owed. However, if we had an honest money system, the assets and the earnings from those assets in terms of dividends should be used to pay down any actual debt. But what they do is they convert them to government bonds, which then creates a liability, which they throw back on the taxpayer. So it's no wonder that we're in this perpetual state. And we walk around, most of us, I was for most of my life, ignorant to the fact that they're robbing us blind right in front of our eyes. I wish you would do a show one day with someone who knows a lot more about this than me, who could come on and really break it down so people could understand it.
Well, it is an issue that needs to be looked at, and again, you talk about an honest money system. The Federal Reserve is just an updated version of the Bank of England, and it was King George's refusal to allow the colonies to have an honest money system that was a prime cause of the American Revolution. That's how important it was. Now, schools don't teach that anymore because they don't want the smart kids to realize we're back in that same mess. Anyway, Tom, got to let you go. Got to do a commercial break. We'll be back with another phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go back to the phones here, story coming, just breaking over the wires right now. Apparently, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had a press conference with German Vice Chancellor Sigmar Gabriel, during which he said Russia will, in fact, respond to U.S. aggression against Syria, and he said it will be proportional. But that's a pretty solid message right there. If the U.S. launches an unprovoked attack on Syria, Russia will move to defend them. We're going to be at war with Russia. These people are insane. Well, no, they're not. They've got their bunkers. They've been building underground bunkers for 10 years. They've been preparing for this for a very, very long time. You paid for it all, but don't expect to be allowed inside. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Glenn in Philadelphia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I heard you mention a little earlier about the conflicts between Pakistan and India. And you also mentioned a recent conflict between China and India.
Yes.
And what's fascinating about this is it's hard to understand the history of these dynamics without knowing the role of British colonization, British colonialism in all of this. Yes. And a lot of Americans probably don't realize that Pakistan didn't exist as a nation state until 1947.
Well, yeah, that was after Gandhi got the British out there, and the Hindus and Muslims decided it would be better to have two countries, India and Pakistan, and now Pakistan split into Pakistan and Bangladesh.
Well, that wasn't a simple process. That was too much blood and strife and everything.
Violent.
They said all the Pakistanis up here, all the Muslims up here, all the Hindus down there, and and to this day, the Hindu versus a Muslim conflict is still a hot issue. And what a lot of Americans also don't realize is, after 9/11, we were understandably fixated on 9/11, and a lot of people don't realize that in end of 2001, 2002, there was a nuclear saber-rattling standoff between Pakistan and India. I mean, I remember saying, we're fixated on 9/11, again, understandably, but here we have two nuclear nations who are, they were saber-rattling over Kashmir at the time.
Yes.
And things have never really totally simmered down. That's what's so ironic when people mistake Sikhs for Muslims and stuff like that. We see all this goofy stuff, but we really don't have the lay of the land. in terms of the volatility of all this and what could potentially go wrong, you know. And then, and even the conflict you mentioned between China, India, and India over that turf thing. You know, again, British colonialism. The British just turned back Hong Kong to China in around '97, I think it was.
Yes.
And so it's like, wow, the West had been meddling in all this stuff for a long time.
Oh yeah, for hundreds of years they've been playing this, and it's always caused a lot of problems. Anyway, real quick, if you ever get a chance, this movie came out a while ago. It's called Gandhi. It's about Mahatma Gandhi. It stars Ben Kingsley, and they go into a great deal of detail over the formation of Pakistan and just how bloody and violent it was. We have to take a break for station identification. Thank you for the phone call, Glenn. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we get back to the phones, a couple more breaking stories here. Apparently, there's been another incident where shells from the Syrian conflict have landed on the Golan Heights, which is still technically part of Syria, prompting another attack by Israel against the Syrian government forces. This is the 4th time they've done this week. All right, we're going to go back to the phones. Kathleen in Paris, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I wanted to talk about Robert David Steele's thing called hashtag unrig. Are you familiar with that?
Not really. Please enlighten me.
Okay. So if people want to know more about it, it's you can search on YouTube for hashtag unrig.
Okay.
And what it's stemming from is that during the campaign, Trump said that the elections are rigged.
Yes.
And so he wants to, right away, this hashtag unrig thing started, and he wants to unrig the elections, and it's all about having honest elections. And it's during the summer, he's promoting that people pressure their congressmen when they're home during the recess, when they can't escape and they're at home. And so Robert David Steele and Cynthia McKinney have written legislation to make honest elections, and they want to pressure the congressmen when they're home for the recess to support this legislation for honest elections. And the thing when I listen to him that gives me hope about everything he's doing is another part of his platform or his agenda is debt jubilee.
Yes.
And that's got to be a good idea. Some people are going to be happy and some not, but we got to start over. And so a debt jubilee. And the other thing that he's promoting that sounds so good, because all the politicians, 99% of the people in Washington, D.C., are just trying to cover their own behind because they've got some dirt.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he's also proposing is this thing like they did in South Africa. What is it? Truth and
reconciliation.
That's it.
Yes.
I kept thinking of forgiveness and pardon and all that. Truth and what you said.
Reconciliation, yes.
And so reconciliation. And so this would mean that the people could just come clean, say, I did it, you're forgiven, and you're not going to go to jail. And so that maybe would keep people from fighting everything because they think they're going to jail. They've got to hide it. They got to hide it. But if we've got one of these things like that, then doesn't it sound pretty good?
Well, yeah, but the problem is in South Africa, the former government had already fallen. So these politicians, they didn't have anything to protect. If the government hasn't fallen, our politicians are going to go on lying and covering their own rear ends because they see themselves getting richer and more powerful in the coming years, and they're not going to want to give that up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, anyway, I managed to find a little glimmer of hope for honest elections and some change listening to Steele and McKinney.
Well, I found the unrig, and I just posted it to whatreallyhappened.com so people can look at it. We do need an honest election system, and again, it's one of the things Trump was talking about last year that he doesn't seem to be taking action on, along with vaccine safety and the rest of it. And it is possible to have honest elections. You have to design the system to have honest elections. Our system is designed to facilitate and conceal election fraud. And it's going to have to be totally torn on out and replaced. I wrote a small monograph about a very easy way to basically crowdsource the verification of the election process. And I think it's a really good system.
Yeah, well, hashtag unrig, and this pressuring, we got to pressure the Congress people while they're home this summer, and because they're going to introduce this legislation for honest elections, and it's the only way. We know that.
Well, it will be rather interesting to see Congress, voting against a bill for honest elections. I think that would send quite a wake-up message to the American people.
You're right. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Before we talk to you, Mark, though, we got to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Okay, Mark, what is on your mind?
What's on my mind is I couldn't help when you start talking about the potential nuclear war and these low-life having, these low-life so-called elites having these bunkers. I think it's about time patriots find where these bunkers are. In a minute, it looks like it's really going to go down. It really looks like it's about to hit the fan. Patriots need to surround these places, stop these elitists from coming, whatever force is necessary, and take these bunkers for themselves. At least then you'd have a few people that would survive, would be at least decent, patriotic type people, and maybe would somehow at some point build a new world. Rather have these evil scum wind up protecting themselves and getting, wind up taking over the world. Because this is terrible. They're starting a war. There's no reason this should be happening. Russia is not the Soviet Union. I don't even know how terrible the Soviet Union was anymore. I don't believe anything anymore. But they certainly not the Soviet Union. There's no reason this should be happening. But these elitist scum, they seem to have their own game plan on what to do. And like you said, if they have those bunkers, we need to get ready. We need to find out where these bunkers are. And when it's when it goes down, or about to go down, make sure they don't get in those bunkers, and that decent people at least can save themselves. I know you once told us that, well, we could just bury those bunkers so to make sure they can never get out.
Yeah, we just cement over the hatches and stuff like that. Well, see, here's the problem. The bunkers aren't all that large. We have a population, 300 million Americans here, and all the bunkers put together, we're only talking 10, 20,000, which is really not a significant number. I think the Patriots are better off just doing as much prepping as they can. Now, the reality is that unless you are living next to a military base or near a major important city, if you're out in the rural area, you'll probably never even see a nuclear bomb. You're just going to have to deal with the collapse of the supply chain, being able to eat safe, clean water, and so forth.
What about the radiation? Radiation is going to kill whoever survives the blast. They're going to just get destroyed by the radiation. There's going to be so much of it. They're talking about a nuclear winter. They're talking about all kinds of horrible things. I don't see how anybody's going to survive something like this unless you're way underground and it's got some kind of protection. That's the thing. I mean, it's just like when I was in the Army. They used to have a drill. What do you do in case of a nuclear war? Now, anybody with any common sense knew what you do. You put your head between your legs and kiss, goodbye. But they used to say, well, you cover yourself with your poncho and face away from the blast. I mean, come on. That was retarded. I don't know if they still teach that in the Army, but that's what they used to teach us. It's not going to happen. I just don't see anybody surviving unless you manage to get yourself underground. I don't know if any kind of wildlife is going to something like this.
Well, let's pull back here and talk about some of the numbers here. I agree that if every single nuclear warhead now deployed around the world were detonated, there would be a major radiation problem along the lines of on the beach. But if we're talking a limited nuclear exchange where there's only maybe 5 or 10 bombs, that's going to be survivable.
Yeah, but both sides are afraid the other side is able to knock their missiles out of the air. Both sides think that they've got, I guess what they used to call the Star Wars defense. Both sides are now afraid that the other side, and evidently both sides do have something that can knock these things out of the air. So this would mean they would probably launch large amounts of missiles. So they know
you could be right. You could be right. You could be right. Obviously, for those of us living here on the island of Oahu, our concern is that our island is so small, and the Russian and especially the Chinese nuclear weapons now in service are so powerful that we're not really going to have to worry about the radiation after it's all over. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Meanwhile, folks, call your congressmen, call your senators, call anybody you can. Tell them no war. We don't want war. Make comments on the fake news networks. Like I made a comment on Fox News yesterday on your Facebook. Tell them they're fake news. We don't want war. Russia's not starting anything. It's protecting themselves. Assad is not a bad guy at all. Assad is trying to keep his nation together against the most horrible type of terrorists. And tell them that we're wise to it. We got to stop this from happening. God forbid, but we avoided during the Cold War. We can have now, and the trouble is people are so dumbed down they don't seem to understand quite what the consequences of something like this would be. It's just sad. It's really a sad thing. And I have kids. I have little grandkids right now too. One was just born. Another was 3.5 years old. I want them to inherit some kind of a world. I want something for them.
I agree.
I don't want radiative, bunch, radioactive waste. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, that is pretty much it. And again, there may be a lot of people thinking, well, this is just a new Cold War, and we got through the last one. But the last Cold War was never intended to go hot. It almost did with the Cuban Missile Crisis. But in this case, we're talking about a hot war, a shooting war with Russia. And once the U.S. and Russia are at war with each other, whichever side feels they are starting to lose, they're going to resort to the nuclear weapons.
That's the problem.
Yep.
I don't think it's going to take very long. I have a feeling we're the ones that are going to be on the losing side, too, at least if it's localized.
Well, again, looking at how expensive our weapons are and how poorly they perform, war is rooted very much in economics. The country that runs out of money first loses. I mean, that's what happened in Germany at the end of World War II. They simply ran out of money, they ran out of fuel, they ran out of food, they ran out of medicine and supplies, and they just simply collapsed.
Morale too, Mike. It's just like during the Vietnam War. Soldiers losing morale, and that's what.
Well, we're already there, and that is an issue that our military planners need to take into account. World War I, the vast majority of the American people bought the story about the Lusitania, helpless passenger ship cruelly sunk by the German U-boats. In World War II, the vast majority of Americans bought the story of a sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. But we're going into this next conflict with the vast majority of the American people knowing the government is lying to start these wars. And so the commitment by the ordinary citizen is just not going to be there. It's like in Art of War by Sun Tzu. For a ruler to prevail in war, his military must believe in the moral rightness of the war so that they will fight fiercely and, if necessary, die. And the civilian population has to believe in the moral rightness of the war so that they will bear the burdens war brings to the country, even to the victorious side. And we don't have that. Our military are exhausted. They've lost their morale. The American people know they're being lied into these wars. And that's another reason why I think the United States is going to lose this one.
I don't know if you remember at the end of the Vietnam War, the head of the Vietnam Veterans Against the War stated in a congressional hearing, I believe it was, or maybe just I forget if it was news, said, "Who wants to be the last one to die for a mistake?" And you know who that was? John F. Kerry, who was perfectly willing a few years ago to get us involved in Syria back then when the first false flag poison gas attack.
Well, it's not like he has to fight in that war or pay for it. I mean, that's what you hoi polloi serfs and slaves are for. And, we got too many humans anyway. Let's start a war and redraw the map.
Well, it could very well be the end of the human race if this happens.
It could. It could. I think there's something like 40,000 warheads in the U.S. arsenal, slightly smaller in the Russian arsenal. I actually don't know the numbers for the Chinese arsenal. And then, of course, you have all those other countries.
7,000 each.
Say again?
I heard 2,000 U.S. and 7,000 Russian. That's what I've heard. So, I don't know about 40,000. I think there might have been at one time 40,000. Whatever it is, 7,000 is enough to destroy the world.
Yeah, plus you have however many warheads India has, however many warheads Pakistan has. Israel is estimated to have something like 400. World War II, we had 2 nuclear bombings because they only had the 2. And now we're starting out World War III with all of these weapons. It is a very, very dire situation. Anyway, Mark, listen, I'm going to let you go, and but I empathize with your concerns, and if it goes nuclear, it's going to be a problem for a large part of the world. We're going to switch to Alex in Florida. Alex, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I would just like to say if we have a nuclear war, I hope we shoot every nuclear weapon we have and end it for all of us instead of living in a world of misery and radiation. Having said that,
well, what a cheerful thought.
I hate to say that. I mean, it's horrible. I don't want it to happen. I'm just saying. Hey, I watched a program the other day. It was a gentleman that was a New York Times bestseller on the Fed coin. Have you heard anything about that?
No, I really haven't.
Well, it was kind of concerning because what his theory is that our monetary system is getting ready to change to sort of like the Bitcoin, but it's called the Fed coin. And what's so concerning about it is he believes that the people of the world, especially the United States, will convert to that system because they're going to give everybody like $1,000 a month.
The universal basic income.
That's right, universal basic income, and basically he believes is that it would be something like that would get the people of the United States to convert to that system. And it's kind of scary. I think that it could happen if that was their plan to do that. That would be the bankers' plan to reestablish their new system, the Fed system. And we have to stand up against it, and we need to, and I heard your program that day where you basically said we need to do more of a Iceland approach and just get rid of the Fed. And that's what we need to do. We need to get rid of the Fed and nationalize currency, and we don't need to go with the Fed coin.
You know, if you really back up and think about it, there is no reason to have a private central bank in charge of your nation's currency. It is simply a privatization for profit by the bankers, aided and abetted by the government itself. And if you go back to the Constitution, only Congress has the authority to coin the money because, again, under the Constitution, the money is the silver and gold content of the coins. The paper notes are merely claim checks. And over time, the private central bankers have delinked the paper from the metal so that they can just print up as much paper as they want and play their little games. And all of this is unconstitutional because the Constitution never authorized Congress to delegate the money creation authority to a private party.
Yes. Well, if you think about it, there's mass people that are basically in slavery. Even if you're making more than $30,000 a year, you're basically a slave to the big corporations. And I could see the people converting to that system, and we need to stand up and say, no, we need to put the bankers in jail like they did in Iceland, and we need to make our own system, not one that's derived from the Fed. The Fed is our enemy. And any downtown in America that you go to, all the skyscrapers are the banks and insurance companies.
Yes.
That will let you know who owns us.
Yeah, you're absolutely
and it's
right.
pathetic.
All right, Alex, we got to let you go. Take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently Spectrum is having a major outage, including portions of Oahu, but obviously we're still connected because the show's going to RBN and BAM users going on out. The reports are somebody may have sliced a fiber optic cable there, as if we don't have enough problems keeping all of this stuff running. All right, let's grab a phone call. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I hope you're well. Your last caller mentioned a guaranteed basic income. Now, this sort of pilot, there's a pilot program going on in Ontario, Canada, the very same thing, a basic guaranteed income. And I think they're starting out at about $1,600 Canadian up here. So, you know, in the United States, it'd be about $1,200 or $1,300. But anyways, what people have to understand is with all the automation that is happening, and it's only going to get worse, there are going to be a lot of people out of work. What do you do with them? Crime rates soar. You know, like, I understand that politicians and bankers and all these rich people are corrupt and maybe they only think about themselves, but what about the rest of us? There obviously are people out there saying, you know, we're going to have a problem here.
Well, yeah, we are.
You know, basically,
we are going to have a problem because, again, we're heading toward a future where the factories and the shopping malls are filled with robots standing around with nothing to do because the human customers don't have jobs and don't have money to buy the products here. And I don't think a universal basic income is going to be the answer. It's going to disincentivize achievement and a desire to do well in society. We saw a lot of that in the former Soviet Union, where you know, people just went out and did the minimum. Everybody was in essence a government worker, and they'd plod along and just do what the bare minimum to get by. And I don't want to see that here in this country. But yeah, there has to be a control on this automation issue. We've got to bring back the jobs for ordinary Americans. We have to have a system where ordinary Americans, working class, middle class, are able to trade their labors and skill for enough money to pour back into the economy to keep it going. And it amazes me that our financial planners, both within the Wall Street and government, either don't see it or they just simply don't care anymore.
They probably don't care. But
yeah, they probably have reached the point where they're saying it's going to collapse. There's no way to save it. Let's just grab every single penny we can grab before it all comes apart.
Well, I don't think it's that bad because, we're at a point now where 20 years ago, people that got into debt weren't figuring on having that debt cleared up till today. We're at that point, you know, where you're basically borrowing from the future, all future productivity and growth. We're at the point now where it's basically stalled out.
Yes.
So, one of two things have to happen. We either have to, reform this debt monetary policy that we seem to be running on, or, like you said, you mentioned the Jubilee, but even then, it's just going to restart over and over again. Like your last caller said there, the Fed was talking about a Bitcoin. At that point, there are enough people out there that realize that, you know what, this is all a farce, and it's fallen apart, and they're trying to keep it from getting to a point where if this does collapse, and like you and I both know it should and it would,
yeah,
there's going to be a hell of a lot of misery, and anarchy will break.
There will be a lot of anger out there.
That fruit.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of anger out there. And if you go back and you... I'm sorry, just hang on. I'm going to keep you through the commercial break, by the way. If you go back and you look at the Depression of the 1930s, you literally saw the police and sometimes even the Army protecting the banks with guns. Because even back then, banks are more important to the government than the American people. And that is an attitude that I think really does need to go away. So we're going to take a break here for a commercial. Al, stay on the phone, and we will come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Al up in Canada and talking about banking, predatory banking, and it's just insane. Anyway, Al, you had something else you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, I think since 2008 or 2009, world debt has tripled, if I'm not mistaken, and that's about 8 or 9 years. What's going to happen when this next downturn really takes hold? Are we going to quadruple it? Compound interest is called compound because it's exponential.
Yeah, it is.
It really is a hockey stick.
Yeah, it really is. It's how these things get hidden from the borrower, where you say, oh, it's a 2% annual rate on the loan. Yeah, but if they're compounding it every minute, it goes up a heck of a lot faster than that. So you need to be very, very careful about that situation. But again, we need an honest monetary system. There wouldn't be any debt globally with an honest monetary system. There'd be small debt. People going to the local depositor bank for mortgages and car loans and things like that. But this idea of allowing a private central bank to issue all of a nation's currency as a loan at interest is designed to enslave that nation and its people in hopelessly unpayable debt. And that's where we are right now. There is no way to pay off the debt to these private central banks. It's designed that way.
Yep. And it has to grow in order to survive. And it has to grow at an exponential rate.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
And eventually it will become straight up. It'll go straight up. It's done. We're close to that point now.
Well, when everybody, what's going to happen is when everything starts to default on the next downturn, the bankers are simply going to seize all the real assets of the planet and put them in their pockets. And they're going to return the world to feudalism, where a few lord bankers own everything, and we spend our lives renting everything and live by the leaves of their lordships, as it were. Anyway, Al, I'm going to let you go. We've got some breaking stories here I need to get into, so thank you very much for the phone call. And just got this one in here from Russia Today. U.S. envoy Nikki Haley is up at the United Nations, and once again, the agenda in Syria is being redefined. Remember, 5 years ago, we got to get rid of Assad. He's evil. His people hate him. Then he won the re-election. He's gassing his own people. That one fell apart. Then the U.S. changed and said, we're not really in Syria to drive Assad from power. We're just there because ISIS and Al-Qaeda are there, and we're just fighting the war on terror. And now that Assad is about ready to end that particular war, now they're back to saying Assad must go. And Nikki Haley is up there saying you can't have Assad in power with a healthy Syria. And they're saying in post-ISIS Syria, Bashar al-Assad has to go. So they're back to that agenda all over again. I was looking at the Fox News feed, and they were running a story here about ISIS gaining a foothold in East Asia. See, this is the game the United States is playing. They created Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and anywhere they want to invade, they send in ISIS to cause trouble and say, we'll come in and intervene. They're getting ready to do that in the Philippines right now. So, getting on back to the economic news here. Story coming out of Zero Hedge, the petrodollar and what the Fed doesn't want you to know. Basically, again, the petrodollar deal was brought about following Nixon's severing of gold convertibility from the U.S. Federal Reserve note. The instant result was less demand for those U.S. dollars internationally. And so the U.S. government went over to these oil-producing nations and they said, we're going to make you a deal, okay? If you agree that you will sell your oil only for the U.S. dollar and invest part of that money in the United States, we will guarantee your military security in the region. And that was called the petrodollar deal because, once again, other countries around the world had to come to the United States and either trade goods for the boxes of ink and paper or borrow them at interest from the Federal Reserve. off of which the United States banking system made a huge profit. Okay, but that was then and this is now. And Israel's aggressions in the region, especially since 9/11, have convinced many of those Middle Eastern nations that the U.S. can't hold up their end of the petrodollar deal. And so they're straining at the leash to break away. 1 year before the United States invaded Iraq screaming weapons of mass destruction, the United Nations gave Iraq permission to sell their oil for the euro instead of the dollar. Same thing happened down in Libya, where Muammar Gaddafi closed the private central bank that had been preying on the Libyan people, set up a state central bank and a new currency based on value, not debt, called the gold dinar. So the U.S. invades, they kill Gaddafi, the gold for the gold dinar has vanished, and Libya is back in slavery to a private central bank. And documents have surfaced from the Obama administration confirming that one of the major reasons they went into Libya was to get rid of that value-based currency because it was such a threat to the U.S. dollar. Other nations in Africa wanted to start using it instead of currency borrowed from private banks. But the rest of the world is starting to turn away from the petrodollar deal. You've got more and more countries are selling their oil for other currencies, including Venezuela, which is why the U.S. is down there destabilizing it and now talking about an intervention. Now, Donald Trump is said to be considering economic sanctions against China over North Korea. Basically saying, it's your fault North Korea is out of control. Therefore, we're going to hit you with trade sanctions. And it isn't like China wasn't trying. They did suspend fuel sales to North Korea. But again, this is a move that could have serious economic repercussions. It's certainly not going to calm relations with China down over the South China Sea. And I don't think China is going to be all that motivated to help with the North Korea situation on behalf of the United States. It's being punished for things it doesn't really have any control over. Now, over in Washington, D.C., they're talking about the new health care bill. They're trying to get a deal before Friday and the long holiday weekend. And they're going back and forth on this thing. But let's look at the last one of these government health care bills. It really didn't work for the American people, did it? It was great for the health insurance companies. The premiums soared, the deductibles soared, and therein lies the problem right now because of Obamacare. 2 out of every 3 patients can't afford their hospital bills. Even after buying the Obamacare-compliant health insurance policies, going through all the paperwork and everything, the sky-high cost of medical care and that deductible, they're still in debt. And again, this goes back to Richard Nixon and the healthcare maintenance maintenance organization bill that he signed, which took the restrictions off medical care regarding profit-making off of people's illnesses and injuries. Prior to that, medical care was considered a service, and there were strict limits on what these facilities could charge you to keep medical costs down. And now it's completely the other way. It's out of control. We've also reached a point here where companies are getting ready to go to war with each other. And as you know, Amazon is starting a new service called Amazon Economy. And Walmart has already sent out a warning to truckers that if they move goods for Amazon Economy, they can forget about working for Walmart ever again. So that's getting very serious over there. Wouldn't it be kind of weird to see Amazon and Walmart having a battle that their employees are out there in the parking lot with their muskets and shooting at each other? It's not a far-fetched concept. If you go back to the movie Rollerball, the original one with James Caan, which was just on TV the other night, and part of the backstory of why the world is the way it is in that movie, where it is a corporate fascistic government. And they literally talk about corporate wars, wars between the large corporations over which corporation was going to run the planet. So it's not that far-fetched an idea. Over at United Parcel Service, they are freezing pensions for 70,000 non-union workers to cut costs. And they're issuing a warning. They're saying it won't actually go into effect until 2023. And basically they're saying this is going to give the affected workers 5 years to prepare with some alternative form of pension plan, which will probably be just as crooked and badly run as all the others that we're seeing collapse all over the country. Now, do you remember Bernie Madoff with the loot? I'm sorry, Bernie Madoff. They even made a movie about his story with Robert De Niro, and I took a quick look at it. Michelle Pfeiffer was playing Bernie's wife. But they were trying to portray him sympathetically, like, gee, he meant well, and he was being put upon, and I'm sorry, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that one tiny bit. But there has been a new development because, as you know, the people who lost money in Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme have reached an agreement regarding settlements with the estates of Bernie Madoff's sons. Now, Bernie, of course, is in jail. Apparently, he's good friends with Jonathan Pollard. And the estates of Madoff's sons are going to pay out about $23 million to victims of the swindler. And it will leave about $2 million in the estates of each of the two brothers. Now, let's see, we had the older son, unfortunately, committed suicide, Mark Madoff, and then his younger brother Andrew succumbed to cancer in 2014. But, of course, they have families and children who were hoping that they were going to wind up with a little bit more. But, you know, $2 million isn't bad. I mean, it all depends on your perspective. I guess if you're used to a life of extreme wealth, it feels like starvation wages. But, you know, Claire and I would be very happy on $2 million. That'd be wonderful here. Turning over to Europe and the immigration crisis over there. There's a story coming out of Sweden in which the National Police Commissioner is saying Sweden is now on the brink of a civil war. They're being torn to pieces by these Muslim immigrants and refugees. Law enforcement can't deal with it. In fact, the last remaining police station in one of the migrant-dominated Swedish suburbs has been forced to close. They can't even protect the police station. And so the National Police Commissioner is saying at this point it is only a matter of time before Sweden will require military intervention from abroad to avoid a humanitarian crisis. Now, the big question here is, did the globalists, open border people, just not see that this was going to happen? Or was this the intended result? We'll depopulate the planet by blending all the Muslims and Christians together and have them kill each other off. Population problem solved. And I don't need to tell you who would be absolutely delighted to see that happen. Except then, of course, who would pay retail. Just to show you how bizarre the laws are getting involved in all of this, 2 Romanian fugitives snuck into Britain. There are warrants out for them. Romania has requested extradition, and Britain is now refusing it on human rights grounds because the jail cells in Romania are considered too small, and they contravene rulings from the European Court of Human Rights that you have to have a minimum prison cell for a prisoner. And so these 2 Romanian criminals are going to be allowed to remain in Great Britain, presumably at large. Britain's not going to lock them up. Now, here in the United States of America, over in New Mexico, in Santa Fe County, 2 more cases of plague have surfaced. They involve a 52-year-old woman and a 62-year-old woman. And you have to say, where did the plague come from? Because it had been eradicated in this country. along with a lot of other illnesses that all of a sudden are starting to re-emerge in the United States following the opening of our borders. That plague is serious stuff. Now, apparently our armed forces are so desperate for new bodies. Yesterday we were mentioning that they're basically lowering the requirements just to get anybody in there, into the uniforms, into the jobs. And apparently they are recruiting illegal immigrants. And the Washington Post it quotes a Pentagon memo that says these are security threats, because they don't know where these people actually come from. They don't know what their background really is. They could be sleeper agents that at a key point in a coming war would carry out acts of sabotage. And yeah, they're absolutely right. This is a huge hole in the security of the military. It's amazing here. All right, let's talk about computers here for a little bit. We're still looking at this latest ransomware, and apparently it's now been tracked down. It first appeared in some accounting software written and sold by a company in Ukraine, and it is leaping all over the place. It is using NSA core code, and it is causing a lot of damage. There are about 20,000 computers infected so far. Mostly it is targeting enterprise networks, intranets. And there are some instructions at whatreallyhappened.com on certain things you can turn off on your machine to avoid being infected, or if you are infected, to prevent it from spreading someplace else. But it does infect over the network. And when we come back from this commercial break, we're going to be talking about this a little bit. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about this latest ransomware, and it's kind of a bizarre story. There's something almost a little weird about this and the way it was deployed. Now, according to Defense One, they're saying this malware emerged from a vulnerability in this commercial Ukrainian accounting software where a patch was mailed to it, an update that apparently was suspected by a lot of people of possibly being a problem because it was very, very large. And it got into this accounting software, and from there it started launching itself across the globe. And concerns this thing could hit hospitals. It has already hit the world's largest shipping firm, Moeller-Maersk. And the reason they're concerned about this is apparently even if you pay the ransom, you will not get your files back. And we were hearing about this yesterday, and apparently you can send in the Bitcoin payment, which is about $300, but the email that was supposed to come back to you doesn't happen. And they're saying the email account that the attack stemmed from has been shut down, and the company's gone out of business. And that means that if you're infected with this malware, you better be up to date on your backups. No amount of Bitcoin is going to get your data back unless somebody comes up with a decryptor. And a lot of companies are working on it. Kaspersky actually has already put together a free downloadable blocking tool for businesses specifically to block this malware. And of course, as we mentioned before, this ransomware is borrowed from this NSA code that was allowed out into the public. And if you really think about the damage and devastation that's being caused around the world, they should have been guarding this software with the same vigilance that they guard the nuclear arsenal. Because it got on out there, and look at the damage they've caused here. Story over at Tech Republic, a former U.S. security advisor, Tony Blinken, was Deputy Secretary of State to Barack Obama, is saying that cyber attacks damage society as much as damaging the physical infrastructure. And still, the U.S. government does nothing about it, which tells us that the NSA is really totally incompetent. They're not able to spy on the entire world internet. It's a big waste of time and tax money. Or, alternatively, and Kaspersky is of this theory, all these hacks and ransomware are coming from the NSA. Just another way to plunder the wealth of the planet for the money junkies. Of course, what the United States is doing right now, it's already out in the corporate media. Russia did this. It's already being blamed on Russia. Russia did it. This is evil Russia. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And again, they're already putting out in the media, oh, yes, we're convinced Russia's behind this ransomware because they attacked Ukraine and they hate Ukraine. And, of course, this ransomware is all across Russia right now. Ukraine and Russia have both been hit almost equally, and it is in the United States and Great Britain and France. It's going across Europe. It's really out of control. And so here's what we get. You know, Russia did it. Russia's to blame. Again, no evidence whatsoever. But right now, the corporate media's attitude is anything bad that happens, it's Russia's fault. Get a flat tire, Vladimir Putin did it. Waxy yellow buildup in your floor corners, Putin did that too. Socks are missing from the dryer, Putin stole them. That's it. No matter what goes wrong, Putin did it. Russia did it. And they're already out there. Meanwhile, over in Russia, they're saying that this latest cyber attack really serves as a wake-up call. There have to be international efforts to halt this epidemic of cyber crime. These criminals have to be hunted down and, in my opinion, crucified live on national TV as a deterrent. But it is out of control. Our government's doing absolutely nothing about it, and Russia is saying it's time to do something. It's time to find a way to find these criminals. And we don't have to find them all. We just make a really nasty example of the ones we get. And I'm absolutely in agreement because we're talking about massive economic losses, loss of productivity, and in the case where hospitals are infected by this ransomware and they can't get their files back, we're talking about possible risk to health and life of the patients. This is all very, very serious. I mean, this thing got into Chernobyl and shut down the automated radiation monitoring system. So now the technicians are having to basically walk around the remains of that reactor with hand monitors like this one, and take the readings manually. And that, of course, exposes them to danger. So it really is completely out of control, and something does need to be done. Something dramatic here. Now, do you remember the case of Lavoy Finicum? This was had to do with that standoff up in Oregon at the Federal Wildlife Refuge. And somebody shot Lavoy Finicum, and everybody was sort of pointing fingers back and forth. It was assumed it might be the FBI snipers, but they said they never discharged their weapons. Police had said they had seen some shells where two FBI agents were standing, and when they went back with the evidence bag, they were gone. Well, apparently, one of those FBI agents has been indicted for lying about the killing of Lavoy Finicum. And apparently his name has not yet been released. But apparently he was caught lying, and they're going to indict him. Now, what I want to see is an indictment for the person who killed Lavoy Finicum, because if he was not shot by the authorized sniper team, then somebody murdered him. And being an FBI agent does not make you exempt from being a murderer. So it is spinning out of control here. Okay, again, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Need some calls here to finish out the show. Now, do you remember the Trump dossier, Trump and some prostitutes in a hotel in Moscow did some really icky things, and it turned out it was a fiction. It's already been discredited. And apparently there was this individual, this former MI5 agent who wrote it, but he in turn was working for a company. And apparently Planned Parenthood has now hired that exact same company. They're trying to push back on all these videos showing that Planned Parenthood was basically taking these aborted babies and selling them for parts, which shocked a lot of people, understandably. And Planned Parenthood is trying to launch a campaign saying that the videos were deceptively edited. Well, again, if you're watching the videos, there's not a lot of editing to begin with. It's not like they're cutting and pasting individual words. And it is rather amazing to see Planned Parenthood, and for that matter CNN, insisting these videos, catching them doing inappropriate things. Oh, it's got to be fake. It's got to be an absolute fake here. When they're the fakers. And by the way, we're getting word Project Veritas has yet more videos about CNN to leak on out. So this is just going to be hammer blow after hammer blow after hammer blow. And boy, I got to tell you, I'm really enjoying it because CNN deserves it. All the corporate media who have betrayed the trust of the American people, they deserve to be brought down. They deserve to be exposed, and it looks like it's starting to happen. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And speaking of corporate media, I couldn't believe this story. This is coming out of Natural News. And apparently over at the BBC, there are apparently some articles published under anonymous. They're not naming the author. And basically they're trying to minimize the gravity of pedophilia. And apparently this is similar to what the far-left publication Salon tried to do several years back. And even the New York Times got in on this. Oh, it's not that big a deal here. You're just, just your politicians are having sex with children. You people are being so picky. And the gist of the current BBC articles is that pedophilia is just another sexual orientation akin to being gay or transgender. Well, there is a significant difference here. If you are gay, or for that matter straight, or whatever, and you are engaging in sex, you are presumably doing so with a consenting adult who knows what they are consenting to. That is clearly not the case with pedophilia. You're taking advantage of little kids who may not even understand just what it is you are asking them to do. That's why there is such a thing as an age of consent law. Below this age, this person is not capable of making these kind of choices, and that is the difference. It's not just another sexual orientation. And like I said, in my youth, I was a wild child, and I'm not going to stand up here and moralize about anybody's sexual behavior, but when it comes to kids, it's a whole different thing. When we're talking about kids, some very primitive paternal instincts kick in, and I am not apologetic about them at all. Because when you do something like this to a child, it's more than just the sex act. You are taking away their innocence. You are taking away their youth. You're forcing them to grow up too young. And the thing about growing up and growing old, it is a one-way street. You don't get to turn around and go back to being innocent. You don't get to turn around and go back to believing in Santa Claus. It's taken from you forever. And when you look at how the victims of pedophilia, how how much trouble they have later in life because of what happened to them. No, this is not just another sexual orientation. I don't know. Maybe they put this out here because of that article about all the child porn that was found in the Vatican the other day. It's amazing stuff. All right. We know that exposure to toxic chemicals has become a major problem in our society. We know that the various government agencies, which are funded on tax dollars, that are supposed to be protecting our health, protecting our environment, are in fact not actually doing that. We have the Flint water problem, and it's not confined to Flint, Michigan. They're now finding chromium in 75% of the tap water in the United States of America. There was that horrific situation out in California. Remember Aaron Brockovich? It's almost like it's become accepted. Remember when the crisis first surfaced in Flint, Michigan? What was the first thing the city government did? They got in bottled water for their own workers. So we have this article, and it's from Natural News again, which is a really good resource, by the way. And they're finding out now that airplane cabin air has been found to be contaminated with toxic chemicals that really can damage your health. And the problem comes from the way air is drawn from the plane engines in order to keep the cabin warm. And there are effluents that are coming off of the engines. There's the oils used to lubricate the engine, very fine particles of metal that are constantly sloughing off. And then there are, of course, the various plastics that are leaching into the environment. And the only current aircraft that isn't using this method of supplying cabin air is the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which actually uses electric compressors to take air from the atmosphere. A much healthier way to go. And I know Boeing's had a lot of problems with the 787, but this was a good way to do this. The chemicals in the air in the airline cabin include organophosphates that can harm nerve cell coatings, and organophosphates have been linked to increased mortality and complications like weakness, seizures, and neuropathy. Exposure to these chemicals is also believed to increase the odds of suffering a cardiovascular event. Now, obviously, these problems are not going to go away anytime soon. But this was what the Environmental Protection Agency was supposed to be doing. We know now that the real reason Richard Nixon formed the Environmental Protection Agency was to just shut the environmentalists up, and also to start a government land grab. Because, again, once gold convertibility of the Federal Reserve note was ended, other nations all of a sudden started wondering, do we really have all the gold collateralizing U.S. government borrowing that is claimed? And if you go back and you look at the history of Fort Knox, there hasn't been an audit of the gold there in half a century. I mean, back in the late 70s, they opened a door and said, you can look, don't touch, don't test. But again, we don't know what is really there. We do know that a lot of the big Wall Street banks have been playing fast and loose with other people's gold. We covered that in that gold conspiracy episode of America's Book of Secrets on History Channel. We don't know. There are way too many secrets out there. So Richard Nixon just started the EPA, which started grabbing huge chunks of land all over the United States, especially out west. And these were lands that had mineral resources on them, natural resources, which were now locked away from the American people, and this was being pledged as collateral on U.S. government borrowing. And they had all these little tiny different programs to conceal the scale of the land grab. The heritage rivers, the roadless areas, the wetlands, and so forth and so on. So if you looked at any one of these programs, they had a little bit of land. But if you totaled it all up, massive amounts of land. And by the way, all of this is illegal under the Constitution because of what's called the Enclave Clause, which says that the U.S. government can only own the land underneath U.S. federal government buildings, military bases, and federal infrastructure like harbors and airports. And the Founding Fathers put that in there to prevent a government that got itself into a financial mess from simply confiscating the heritage of the American people, our inheritance, our public lands, and selling them off, which is effectively what's been going on here. When the U.S. government defaults on its debt, which now seems imminent, you're going to have a lot of creditors showing up at the border and saying, you know, we want to take over this area. It's a natural park. We're going to put up a shopping mall and a couple of other things like that. And we're going to have to be ready to stand firm and say, no, that government didn't have the legal authority to pledge our public lands as collateral on their debt. And we're sorry for your losses, but you should have done a little more due diligence before you signed that check. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Russell in Australia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good morning, Michael. I'm just want to reply. One of your callers mentioned about the nuclear tension build-up with India and Pakistan. Just an interesting point at the time, India had been running in its newspapers the story of how Pakistan's ISI had wire transferred money to Muhammad Atta and the hijackers involved in 9/11.
Yes.
And so Pakistan, being run by the CIA, they trumped up this whole nuclear tension thing. And another interesting point is Tony Blair, when all this tension was going on, he flew off to do a peace mission, but while he was on this so-called peace mission, he managed to negotiate a deal to sell weapons to India. So much for the peace mission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we have all these world leaders. What was that quote from Mark Twain? In the interval between campaigns, he washes the blood from his hand and works for the brotherhood of man with his mouth. And we seem to see that. Ultimately, and we learn this in advertising, we learn this in television, what people really want is what they're going to spend their money on. And in our country, it is on weapons. The development of weapons, the export of weapons. We are a warrior society. Just thinking about all the suffering caused by the United States, somebody did a study and estimated that since the end of World War II, the United States government has been responsible for something like 20 million deaths around the world in the intervening years. And that's World War numbers right there.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, isn't it, Mike? And I just noticed that when the tensions in the Middle East, and Trump was talking about a peace mission too, but they managed to negotiate a sale of about, what was it, $120 million worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia, which should be one of the countries that no weapons are sold to.
Yeah, I would agree with you. We do have some members of Congress who are trying to push back on that and say that we shouldn't pour any more weapons into the Middle East at all until things calm down, because the U.S. is fanning up this political tension. Then they're sending in the arms, and the result is going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Mike, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks, and have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. G'day yourself, and have a good afternoon. Okay, moving on here. It is. Our politicians go on out and they talk about peace at the same time they're making weapons deals. Weapons are big, big business, and I can imagine right now that many of the U.S. defense contractors are getting very, very nervous about some of the weapons that are starting to come out of testing and into production in Russia and China, because they're very capable and much less expensive. And I can imagine that probably part of the deal between the U.S. and Crown Prince bin Salman wasn't that the U.S. was going to sell those weapons to Saudi Arabia, but that Saudi Arabia had to buy them, and had to buy them from the United States. We've seen that kind of economic arm twisting before with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. You will buy our GMO. That's part of the agreement. So the fight is over who gets to sell more bombs and bullets than anybody else. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Call in and join the show, and we'll be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm looking at the Fox News feed, and they're talking about this idea of a universal basic income. They're talking socialism. They're talking about having a Soviet-style economy here where everybody is paid by the government. And, again, the concerns I have with that is it disincentivizes achievement and a desire for excellence. Everyone becomes a government employee. And we all know how pokey and slow government employees are. But in the rising face of automation, maybe. But again, I think if you want your gross domestic product to grow, you have to have people put to work. And there are 100 million Americans right now willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs for months, if not years. And maybe this idea of a universal basic income is sort of a last desperate Hail Mary pass at trying to hold the economy together. The big issue is who's going to pay for it all? Where is the money for the universal basic income coming from? That's a good question here. And believe it or not, Hawaii is getting ready to try this just next year. There's going to be a state-level universal basic income. I have no idea how much it's going to be. But who's going to pay for it, especially when our state is in serious economic trouble? Tourism is down. The cost overruns on the light rail. I'm sure that for people who just want to sit at home and be taken care of by the government, it sounds like a really good idea. But where does the money come from? Because I'll tell you right now, the corporations and the ultra-rich, they're not going to want to pay for this. They're addicts to money. If they weren't, we wouldn't be in this mess to begin with. But they keep promoting it. It is socialism. They're turning the United States of America into the Union of Soviet Socialist States. All righty, now then, a guy known as Wild Bill for America, his real name is William Finlay, he's an author and speaker, apparently got arrested at a Canadian airport for the crime of smuggling hate speech into Canada on his iPad. And I used to think Canada was a really cool place to go to. And apparently he was invited to speak at an event at Calgary's Olympic Plaza called the Patriotic Unity Mega Festival, coordinated by Canada's Worldwide Coalition Against Islam, which also has organizations in Europe and Australia. And apparently a special event permit for the event was denied by Calgary's Department of Canadian Recreation on the basis that the organization and the messages it espouses are hateful. And apparently when he crossed the border, they looked into his iPad and they saw information critical of Muslims, and they arrested him. And don't know how that's going to turn on out. But apparently the right to privacy has vanished in Canada, like it has here in the United States of America. And all I can say again is thank goodness for the United States Supreme Court unanimously ruling there is no such thing as a hate speech exception to the First Amendment right to freedom of speech. Because this, I think, is a good example of how that's being misused. Oh, it's hate speech. We can throw you in prison. Hate speech is subjective. There's no guideline for it. You just have to have somebody stand up and say, I'm offended. Oh, must be hate speech. There's no benchmark for the thing. So it's ridiculous. Now, apparently over in London, the violence is in the schools is getting out of control. Apparently there were 3 fatal stabbings in London within hours of each other. And apparently they're now starting to issue these metal detecting wands to the schools, so that as kids come in through those gates, they're given a wanding to make sure they're not carrying a knife. All right, we're going to take a break for some commercials here. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And it seems that CNN simply cannot stop pouring out the fake news. Like I said earlier in the show, one of our listeners wrote on in and said, it ought to be renamed to Bezos' blog, because that's all it is these days. So apparently CNN has now run a story. They're opposed to Trump Care. And they're telling this story of Ariana and Kevin Gonzalez, and all they want is birth control. And if they live in California, and if the Republican alternative to Obamacare becomes law, they'll be having to drive over the border to Mexico to get their birth control. Now, they have health insurance, and they've got money. She's got a very good job as a high school teacher. And what the CNN article is saying is that the Trump Care could shut down Planned Parenthood, which a lot of people think ought to be shut down after being caught doing what they're doing. But here's the flaw in CNN's stories. If the Gonzaleses want birth control, they can get it a lot of other places besides Planned Parenthood. This is CNN being dishonest again. You would think they would learn a lesson. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Dan in Washington, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking the call. I just had a comment, or my theory on the automation. I think it's just another lie that they've come up with to explain why the jobs have gone overseas to places like China. And I think they come up with the steady barrage of lies because they don't want to talk about tariffs and the fact that America had, about 20% tariff rate on imports the first 150 years, and that created our industry to begin with. And then since they switched to free trade and globalism, they got rid of the tariffs, and then the jobs go away. And it seems like every 5 years they come up with another excuse why, and now it's just automation,
Well,
before that it was unions or whatever else.
Well, I did not have a good relationship with the unions when I worked in film. In fact, they were the bane of my career. But I think the problem at this point is automation has not yet started displacing a large number of jobs, so I don't know that it's an excuse. But like offshoring, it's one of those things where the first company that gets in there is going to make a lot of money, and everybody else is going to hop on board, not realizing the long-term costs. Because for a properly functioning economy to continue, you always have to keep in mind that your employees collectively are also your customers collectively. If they don't have jobs, then you don't have customers. It is that simple. And this rush to automation, again, if they're talking about a universal basic income, where is the money going to come from? And I know Bill Gates is out there saying, well, we can tax the robots. But that's all well and good, because if nobody's going to the shopping malls, those robots will be shut down or sold. If people aren't ordering products from the factories, the sale of robots will fall off. Automation is only going to be a success if there's a continuing supply of human customers for the goods and services being produced, and those humans have enough money to be buying things and keep the economy going. And maybe it's another excuse to take heat off the fact that it is this system of private central banking that is behind all of the hardship and privations that we're all dealing with. And we really do need to look at that. Now, obviously, there are some jobs that I think automation is very suitable for, going and cleaning up nuclear reactors and so forth. There are a lot of almost totally robotic factories already in existence, mostly in Europe. And it hasn't really resulted in a tremendous displacement there because there are other sectors of employment. Here in the United States, the jobs are gone. We have 100 million people. Surplus. And add to that all these refugees and illegal immigrants pouring on in. There are no jobs for them. Right now, everything's being a handout, and it's running out of control. We don't know how much new money the Federal Reserve has created to try and keep this system going. And by the way, they had a great day on the stock market. They're still out there tinkering with that.
Yeah, I agree totally. I just, it's the way they're presenting this, like the reason the jobs are all gone is because of automation. And like you said, there hasn't been that much. I mean, I drive trucks and they keep saying we're going to get replaced by robots, which they may do a little bit, but because of safety issues or whatever, I don't see it happening that quick. But they're presenting it like that's the reason all the jobs are gone. They just keep repeating this, well, it's automation. So then the average person you talk to say, well, those jobs are gone because of robots. And it's like, that's not true. They're gone because of cheap labor overseas.
Let's just stipulate, how boneheaded Wall Street and Washington, D.C. had to be to allow automation to displace human workers. They were thinking about, whether they could do this without really thinking about whether they should do it. And obviously the answer is, for the vast majority of occupations, no, it wasn't a good idea. Because, again, if you don't have a human population that have good jobs, that have money to pour into the system, then all the robots are going to stand around there absolutely motionless, nothing to do.
Yep, I agree totally. Kind of a side question for you, not related, regarding Kaonohi and the gold. Have you heard what happened to Kaonohi's gold? I'm kind of curious. Wasn't he one of the richest first people on Earth before Libya got destroyed?
Well, the gold we're talking about here wasn't whatever he had personally. This was gold that was acquired to back the gold dinar. They were literally going to have, and you've probably seen them in other contexts, the money was going to be this plastic card with a little chip of actual gold in it that represented the item of value. And as far, I've not been able to track down where all that gold vanished to after Kaonohi was killed.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for taking the call. Enjoy the show.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. All righty. Now, somebody just sent me an article. We were talking earlier in the program about a jubilee. And to give you a little background on where that comes from, jubilee was actually something that was done in ancient times, where they understood that the practice of usury would destabilize an economy and a country. And so every half century, they would have a jubilee where all the slaves were freed and all the debts were zeroed out, and it was basically a reset, restart. And it kept the civilizations going. Then they stopped having that, and we started seeing usury start to tear nations apart and bring them down here. So somebody sent me this interesting little article that Japan has what they call a sovereign debt jubilee, and the way it works, and it's creative bookkeeping, but it seems to work here. The U.S. government is driving up its sovereign debt and the interest owed on it in the sure conviction that somehow or other they're going to make you and your kids and grandkids pay for it. Japan is actually canceling its debt at the rate of $720 billion per year. And the way they're doing that is they're selling the debt to their own central bank, which returns the interest to the government. Looks like kind of a shuffle here. But basically, while most central banks have ended quantitative easing, the Bank of Japan continues to buy its government's debt. Now, an interest-free debt owed to yourself that is rolled over from year to year is effectively void. In other words, a debt jubilee. It doesn't really exist anymore. Now, again, it's not a real solution, but if it's working for Japan, we might want to look at it here. Ultimately, the world has to go back to an honest monetary system. And as we edge closer to a major financial upheaval, we're looking at the globalization of all these banks to possibly drag the entire system down as a whole. And when that happens, of course, the money junkies are going to want to come up with a new one, a new global private central bank. That'll make everything okay. No, it won't. private central banking got us into this mess. More private central banking will not get out. So we, the people of planet Earth, are going to have to stand firm and say, we demand an honest money system, or we're not going to play with you guys anymore. We're not going to listen to the bankers. We're not going to listen to the government unless we get an honest money system. And again, that was a big, big part of the American Revolution, to break free from the debt-based currency of the Bank of England. All right, let's look at what's going on here. Apparently, the president of Hungary has asked President Trump to criminally investigate George Soros. There's a good example of a money junkie who does bad things with his wealth. And Soros, of course, has been tinkering with other countries' politics. Nobody makes a big stink about that. It's only bad when Russia does it. Israel's allowed to do it around the world. Soros is allowed to do it. You know, he's our guy and everything. And apparently Hungary has had enough of this nonsense. And they're asking the U.S. government to investigate George Soros. Don't think it's going to happen. Soros has got enough lawyers to hold off prosecution until he dies. Another little article, this is coming out of Alternative News Alert. Apparently the deep state and the Democrats are terrified of Russia. And I'm not talking about this idea of Russia hacked the election or Russia colluded with Trump. It's the fact that these narratives are failing. They're stumbling. Polls are showing most Americans aren't buying any of this bad Russia, Russia hacked the DNC, and so forth and so on. And it is the fact that these narratives are failing that have people in Washington, D.C. very, very nervous, because we're starting to see, especially with this latest scandal around CNN, that whole contrived propaganda illusion that is supposed to hold us in control, keep us in our place, it's starting to come apart. It's starting to come apart at the seams. And that's why they're afraid. Because if they can't actually prove Russia did something, if the profiling project actually gets evidence Seth Rich was hit by a hitman, if it's confirmed Seth Rich was the DNC leak, look at all of those lies that are going to unravel, going back months. And the corporate media is really reached the end of its rope, so to speak. So many of their lies and hoaxes have been exposed. They've run out of room, if you will. There's no more tolerance out in the audience to be lied to some more. People are really fed up with that. And apparently CNN is bringing in a public relations firm because of the second Project Veritas video. And again, we're getting word more are on the way. But if you really think about it, the corporate media's been lying to us our entire lives. We didn't know because we didn't have an internet. We didn't have independent media. People who knew the truth about what was going on couldn't get it out there. For example, following the assassination of John F. Kennedy, there were people who knew the crazed lone nut story was nonsense. A lot of them died, like Dorothy Kilgallen. And there were American citizens who read the Warren Report, or they had that copy of Post magazine that shows Oswald at street level when Kennedy grabs his throat. We all knew it was a hoax. We couldn't get it out there. Today, it is very different. Back then, communication was top-down. Comes from the government, goes through the media, gets dropped on you, end of story. Now it's peer-to-peer. We're all sharing information with each other. We're calling out the liars. The Internet is a jungle environment where untruths simply do not survive, whether it's corporate media, government, whatever. It is, if you think about it, a pure democracy. Everybody has an equal voice. Now, when Donald Trump won the election last November, I was elated for a couple of reasons. And one of them was that at some point there's going to be a watershed where the corporate media is going to lose their audience. There's going to be one lie too many, one deception too many, and that would be an opportunity for the independent media to make some gains. We're overdue. It's very frustrating for the independent media to be struggling as hard as we are, just barely getting by, and see these paid liars, literally paid millions of dollars to lie. It's very frustrating. And at heart, I think we're all just people. And we understand that the liars should not be paid huge amounts of money to lie to the public. And I'd like to see that come on about. Okay, now let's see. Getting on back to some more news here. Coming up here on the end of the show. Okay, Syria has now officially claimed that there is nothing to the story coming out of the White House that Assad is getting ready to gas more innocent people, which is, it's a given. Again, why would he do that? There's no reason. He doesn't have a motive. He doesn't have a motive. Somebody just wrote in an email, CNN bringing in a PR firm. It's one group of professional liars bringing in another group of professional liars. Because that's what public relations is. It's lying to the public for money. Spin doctoring is another word for it. But that sounds negative, so it's public relations. Remember that the nurse, the phony nurse from Kuwait, claiming the Iraqis were leaving the babies on the cold hospital floor? That was put together by a public relations firm. Hill and Knowlton. They actually brag about it at the trade shows. Boy, we snookered them good here. Alrighty, getting on back here. Apparently, one of the charter schools is now officially rejecting Common Core. That is also something that needs to go. Common Core is not about education. It's about indoctrination. It's about teaching obedience to authority. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Hello, I'm Erica. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today. We're going to take a quick phone call from Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. On the matter of fluoride, I used to call into my local talk radio show and try and kind of test them and see if they were awake and conscious. And I would say, you know, you put sunscreen on your children before they go out on the beach, but you don't put fluoride in their water to keep them from getting cavities. And that would always just blow their minds. It went right over their head. They were like, ooh, or something. But, you know, I'm sure it's the same in Hawaii. For many years, I've noticed, like in the baby sections of different stores, Target, Walmart, grocery stores, they have these gallon jug waters, and it says with fluoride added, and it's got a picture of the little baby with the pacifier in its mouth. And I'm like, you know, how do they get away with that?
Well, you know, at least it's truth in labeling, and people who know what fluoride is really doing can avoid it. But again, it's a mild tranquilizer, and I think that was a big part of the reason why it was pushed into the drinking water supply, so that the American people would stay calm, cool, and collected while the governments and the banks did what they were going to do.
And CNN does a lot of reports on that as well, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. CNN, like the rest of the corporate media, you know, GMOs are good, vaccines are good. You will buy this product. We control your mind. I'm starting to think CNN. I keep flashing back to the opening of the original Outer Limits with the little oscilloscope wave there, and the control voice saying, "We will control all you see and hear." And CNN ought to do that. Remember when they had James Earl Jones doing their logos? You know, this is CNN. All right, well, listen, Frank, I'm going to let you go here because I have one final story that I want to get into here before the end of the program. This is a very good question. This is over at Government Slaves. Can CNN survive being exposed as fake news? And the issue isn't whether they're going to lose their audience and advertisers. The question is, how long are their corporate masters going to be signing the checks to keep those corporate media outlets propped up? Because the reality is they have been losing money like crazy for a long, long time. And their corporate owners are underwriting the losses in order to keep the propaganda machine going. But we may be approaching the point where the owners of the corporate media are looking out at America and saying, this doesn't work anymore. CNN can't convince Americans anymore. MSNBC can't convince Americans anymore. And at some point, those checkbooks are going to go away. And those people with their multi-million-dollar salaries for lying are going to be out of work, although I'm sure they all have golden parachutes and they're going to be well taken care of. But it's only a matter of time because, again, with this embarrassment with CNN, this could be the beginning of the end. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow here, Thursday, on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please share what you learn here with everybody. Grab those 2 CNN videos off the front page of whatreallyhappened.com and make them go viral. That's your assignment. This is a call to Rivero's Rangers. We'll see you tomorrow. Aloha, America.